But my name is Maggie. I'm a senior associate here at Business Forward. On behalf of our team, we're so glad that you could join us today for our interactive training on policymaker outreach. Today's training is going to focus on best practices for policymaker outreach so that you can start advocating in your community today as business leaders. So as I mentioned, today's session is interactive and we look forward to hearing from each of you. Just before we get started, I just want to cover a couple, ground items. After today's training, we'll share the presentation and other documents used during the training today. So you should have those shortly after this meeting is concluded. For sound quality, we ask that everyone remains muted unless you're speaking. And then last but not least, if you feel comfortable, we really love to have your camera on. It's really helpful for us to put faces to names, and it'll help us feel like we're all at the table together. So hopefully today, everyone on today's call has spoken with a member of our team, either Thorne or myself, and has indicated interest in being engaged in Business Forward. So thank you all for your high level of engagement, and we're really excited to continue to work together. So let's get started. I'd like to introduce our resident expert in strategic communications, Christine Mickelson, who's the Senior Account Manager at Spitfire Strategies. So Christine, I'll hand it over to you.
Hi all, I'm so excited to talk with you today. Just a quick run through of the agenda. So the first piece we'll be talking about is why policymakers listen to business leaders, really how you can leverage that desire to talk to y'all. The strategy for how we think about reaching out to policymakers, and then tactics that'll help you do so. At the end, we'll leave space for questions. The first piece we're going to talk about is why policymakers listen to business leaders. The first thing is you're an important constituent group. You are employers, you bring jobs, you help the economy, specifically within the district. And the bottom line is that policymakers want to stay in office, and they know that business leaders can help them do that. You are time and again found to be really trusted messengers to lots of different people, and you can really help policymakers bridge some of those gaps. So that's why they're really going to be focused on listening to you. They want you on their side, and they know that they need you. So they're inherently going to have to care about the issues that you're bringing them. So we're going to talk through a little bit of the strategy on how to bring those issues to their attention. But one of the examples that we always love to point to is actually from some of the work that we've done with Business Forward. We helped write this and place this op-ed with Teresa Barrett. And we actually got a note from Sherrod Brown saying that he'd seen the piece and that she did a great job. And that's one of those ways, and that one of those ways in that you can start talking to policymakers. So these are going to be real world solutions for getting in front of them and getting your point across.
Great. So you have heard us probably say before, if you've joined one of these sessions in the past, is that you always want to start with strategy and know what it is that you want to achieve when you are thinking about how to engage legislators. And so, whether it's passing a specific legislation to support, let's say, reentry and opening up, ban the box is a great example of legislation and also policy that different corporations have taken on related to specific issues that you could use as an example for the kind of goals you want to set. But as part of setting those goals, it's kind of important to understand what legislators can and cannot do. So legislators are able to introduce or sponsor a bill, right? They are also able to vote for a bill. So often people advocate to their legislators asking for them to vote for a specific type of legislation. They can also call a hearing, which is a great way to bring awareness or additional issue understanding, education, data on a particular issue. And that's also something that you could potentially participate in as someone to testify at a hearing on behalf of a legislator or in partnership with a legislator. They also set the budget. So depending on if they're state or local, at the federal level, they are part of setting the budget on all sorts of different issues, from from housing to jobs to even like the roads we all drive on. They also are able to lend support to an issue. So often when a legislator speaks out about an issue, they help to sort of set the agenda for a particular session, given the issues that they care about. And they're also able to make appointments to specific committees. So let's say, we're working with some folks in Maryland right now, and their goal was to get someone on a committee for the new governor's education committee, right? So those are just some things to sort of keep in mind about like what's in their capacity to do. And that's just to say that sometimes, depending on what your goal is, a legislator isn't actually the decision maker that you need to reach, because they are sort of hamstrung by the particular things that they're legally able to do. So let's say you want to change something in your school district, or let's say you want to change something related to like a department policy under Health and Human Services. Those are going to be different types of decision makers. So an administrator, or maybe it's a principal, maybe it's a superintendent, but there's just, it's good to sort of understand that there's a range of what different decision makers have the capacity and power to do, and to integrate that into your strategy. And that's not to say that you suddenly have to know all of this stuff. That's just to say that if you have questions, or if you want to think through more about what your specific goals are and who is the best audience to engage with when it comes to a legislator, that's something that the Business Forward Network can support you to help sort of figure out. So you always want to start by knowing what it is that you want to do, what your goals are. And then it's time to do some research. And again, we're just going to give you sort of a really high level overview of what kind of research can be helpful, but know that again, like this is something that can take a lot of time and energy, and a lot of these questions, Business Forward and its network actually already has the answer to. So just to sort of name, it's important to sort of understand the background of a particular legislator. So like, where are they from? What do they care about? What their particular position is on the issue that you care about. And any other like important committees that they may be a part of. And again, some of that is understanding like where decisions get made, which of course is something that Business Forward can support you on. But usually a lot of this stuff is on their website. So you can go to a legislator's website, they'll give you sort of a bio about who they are, they'll name the issues that they have specific positions or platforms on, it'll likely tell you what committees they're a part of, and all of that information is super, super helpful, because if you go to the next slide, those are all things that should be integrated into how you actually frame up your issue when you go to talk to them, right? So legislators are just like anybody else. We want to be tapping their existing values to help them better understand or care about the issue that we really care about. It's really hard to get people to completely change what they care about in a short amount of time. That's usually something that takes years, if not decades, to like deeply change the values and interests that people have. And so the best way to do this in a short amount of time is to actually bridge the gap between what you know they care about and what you care about, and finding that common ground. So like, let's say you really care about health, like we heard one of the people mention, and you go to their website, the legislator's website, and you don't see anything about healthcare on their website. What are some other indicators that you can connect the dots between healthcare and access to healthcare and things that they care about? So like, one thing I would always look at is like, do they have children? Because often parents are very concerned about issues related to youth health, youth mental health. They care about schools, they care about things that impact their children, because they have kids, and that's a like high value for all of us, or a high sort of decision-making tool for all of us. It could also be that they've had a serious health challenge in the past, or they have ongoing health challenges. So they might mention something about being like a diabetes advocate, or like something like that. And so they may not be making the direct connection yet, but you can help them make that connection between how these things matter. It's also really important to use the business case. So again, Christine kicked us off by saying how compelling business leaders can be as advocates on issues they care about, specifically when it comes to legislators, because a lot of decisions that are made in Congress, that are made by local legislators, all have to do with the economy and budget and jobs. Like, that is what legislators really, really, really care about, because it is key indicators of them like whether or not they're successful as legislators. And so leaning into the business case for your issue as part of how you connect with legislators as a business leader can be very, very impactful. So thinking about not only the moral imperative, which of course is important, but also why, for example, Dr. Yvette, why equity and diversity in a workplace makes companies run better, smoother, be more productive, be more competitive, in addition to all of the moral reasons why this matters, right? So that's important to sort of consider as you're thinking about how to reach out to these folks. You also, as you're making your case to a legislator, you want to be really concise and compelling. Legislators have about 2 seconds worth of time to engage with you because they have a really busy schedule. And often it's actually their staffers that you'll talk to first, who are often specifically, either they are focused on a specific issue because they're an issue area expert, or they're just like their main point of contact. And so you want to be super, super concise and compelling when you reach out to a legislator, when you set up a meeting, when you do anything, because they just have such a short amount of time. And so if you send them a really long email, it's going to be really hard for them to, they're not going to read the whole thing, and it's going to be hard for them to know what your main point is. So I would think short and sweet. I would bold what's most important, and I would make sure that your even the subject of your email is really, really strategic, because again, like that's what someone's going to see first. And so just like when you're talking to the media or pitching the media, you want it to, draw their attention right away. The last piece is it's super important to be responsive. So if you're going to reach out to your legislator, don't do it right before you go on vacation. Like do it when you actually have time to be responsive to their requests if you do hear back from them. Again, this is same for reporters. Like you want to show them that you can be responsive and helpful when they're ready to engage. So other things to consider when you're engaging with legislators is to think about timing. So of course, there's a lot of key moments during a legislative session that are good moments or maybe harder moments to engage with legislators. So, you have your legislative session, and that's something that you can easily find out on your state or city's website about like when that takes place, or district, sorry. When that takes place, they usually are starting around January in the early new year. And then there's moments where they will be out for recess. So again, like sometimes depending on the type of legislation or the type of thing you're trying to talk to a legislator about, recess can be a positive time to reach out to people, because it often means that they're back in their district and they have more time in district to like be meeting with people and talking with people where they're from, as opposed to like if they're federal, they're out in DC or traveling or whatever. But it could also mean that sometimes they're just not going to respond at all because they're taking a bit of a break. So you just want to be sort of aware of timing and how that could have implications for when you are reaching out. It's also important to consider elections. So of course, elections add an additional pressure to legislators to like get stuff done. And so that can be a helpful way to create urgency around them taking action on a particular thing that voters really care about. So we saw that work really well in the last election cycle related to reproductive justice and reproductive rights. So advocates and folks were able to sort of push on the urgency of that issue, especially for people that were up for re-election. So I would think about, those opportunities. There's also stuff going on in the news cycle all the time. So whether that's like, everyone right now is thinking ahead to the anniversary of January 6th. Like, is the issue you care about something related to democracy or voting rights or something like that? And that's a great moment to be talking to legislators about an issue because it's something they're already thinking about. They know they have to put a statement out about it, and like, how great, I can talk to Nathaniel, who's going to help me like frame up this issue and give me a real person's quote to add to my statement, right? So thinking about what's in the news cycle and how you can leverage that as a way to engage folks. And I would say, like, a lot of times the more local, the better. So thinking through not only like what are the like big national stories, but what's going on locally that you can tie to your issue, because that can also be a really strong hook that maybe they haven't heard from other people, right? Because remember, they're getting contacted by like everyone and their mom. And so finding something that's a unique time, a unique thing to leverage that only you could be their go-to person for is usually what's going to be most successful. It's also really important to think about what a name, not just think about, but name what you can actually offer them. So of course, our legislators work for us, like yada, yada, democracy, all that stuff. But when it comes down to it, like they are still real people that need to be convinced and need additional motives to be supportive and to take the action you want them to take. So whenever I outreach to a legislator, I always think about not only what am I asking of them, but what can I offer? And again, this is true for reporters as well. So is it that you have a personal story that can help bring to life this issue? Like, you know, we've all heard the State of the Union or like debates where they tell a very specific little vignette of a story that like gives them credibility and helps sort of like bring an issue to life. Like they are constantly looking for those kinds of stories. So I would think about whether you have one or someone you work with has one that you can tell to help them do that. You also have expertise. So like, sorry, it was Tim, I believe, that mentioned that you're always looking for data and like sharing of good data related to healthcare. And that kind of data or any data points you can point them to that help them make better arguments about the issues you care about is something that can be super supportive and really, really helpful. So whether that's like you just, you say, I'd love to talk to you about tax reform. And, you know, given my expertise and such, I could really help bring to light like some of the reasons why this is so incredibly important for folks in your district. And, you know, you could give them just sort of that teaser, and then you can build on that by sharing like a one-pager or additional statistics. And I know Business Forward has some of that material that you can use to support these kinds of engagements with policymakers. And then the last thing is connections. So do you have a connection at the Chamber of Commerce that you can introduce them to? Do you have a connection of similar educators that you are regularly meeting with that can talk to them about education policy? Like think about who in your circle can you introduce them to that will also be supportive and help them achieve their goals in addition to yours. And so this is like to underscore all of that. It's really, really important to build relationships now before you need them. Like no one wants, you know, when you first meet someone, you don't ask them to like help you move or drive you to the airport, right? Like that's something you reserve for like friends and family. And this is the same. It's like you don't only want to go to folks when you absolutely need something right now from them. You actually want to like build that relationship so that the ask feels appropriate and they're more likely to say yes. So that could even mean just saying like, hi, I'm so-and-so from your district, and I want you to know that I really care about XYZ. I know that you're setting your agenda for next year, and if you ever need support or expertise on this topic, I'd love to talk to you, right? So you like introduce yourself, you let them know what you can be helpful for, and then let's say they make a speech about that particular issue that you see coverage of, you can follow up with them and say, hey, I saw your speech on tax reform, and I thought you hit some really, really good points. I'd love to hear more about what you have planned, right? So it's like that positive, or maybe it's negative reinforcement, whatever it is, having engagement with them over time will help build up that relationship and mean they're more likely to answer your call when you're reaching out to them about something that's time sensitive.
Great, thanks, Annabelle. And now we're going to go a little bit into tactics that you can use to get in front of policymakers. The first thing is meetings. That's really the gold standard. Aaron Burr was right. You know, got to get in the room where it happens. that is also one of the reasons why we suggest building relationships before you need them. It's not likely that on initial outreach, you can request a meeting with a policymaker and then they'll immediately grant it to you. You want to have a few touch bases beforehand so you can actually get into the room where it happens. If you can, that's really, again, the gold standard. The other thing that you want to do in building those relationships is emails and calls. All of these emails and phone numbers are publicly accessible. You want to be touching base, like Annabelle said, after a speech, after a big election, after a debate, even email, calling in, letting them know how you're feeling. And the thing to not forget here is to be talking to their staff as well. Legislative staff, whether it's district staff who really are charged with maintaining relationships in the district, or their communications director. These are people that are really going to have the ear of the policymaker already. So you want to be making sure that you're building relationships with them. It's not just an email to your congressperson, it's an email to their staff as well. So meetings and emails and calls will really help set the stage. The other piece that's really important is leveraging media or op-eds, because then it becomes public pressure on the issue. Again, whether it's positive pressure or adversarial pressure. Their staff, legislators and their staff, all read news clips on the daily. Anywhere they're mentioned, anywhere their district is mentioned, issues that they care about, they're reading those clips. So if you have a perspective on a timely issue, securing coverage either via an interview or an op-ed in the district, in the publication that like supports their district, or a DC focused publication, if they are DC based some of the time, can really help. And it'll help raise your profile as well. Once you secure a piece, whether again, it's an interview or an op-ed, you want to make sure you send it to those staff that we talked about. Communications directors' emails are all publicly available. Send them the piece. Want to make sure that you saw this. They will make sure that that clip gets into the hand of the legislator because it'll be important for them to see. The other way to make sure that you get in front of them is to mention the policymaker by name. We do this in op-eds a lot. Just saying something along the lines of, if Senator X, Y, and Z supports this bill, it'll help Ohioans here at home. If their name is mentioned in a piece, you better believe they're reading it. And then the last piece with media and op-eds is that this is something that Business Forward has been really great about supporting all of you in doing. So we'd love to help with op-eds if you have any ideas. So make sure to reach out to them for that. And the last piece, which is really great, is Business Forward runs these incredible briefings to get in front of policymakers and really move issues forward. So that's another incredible way to engage.